In my humble opinion, Yuuji Itadori lacks an interesting personality, solid depth, and an engaging skill set. Now wait, before you click off, hear me out. It's no secret that Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the more popular shonen of the quote-unquote new gen. In fact, it's probably one of the most popular, alongside My Hero Academia and Black Clover. But in my opinion, there are quite a few things that are wrong with the series. Before anybody gets on my case, I've been reading Jujutsu Kaisen since chapter 1, and I'm up to date with the most current chapter at the time of this video. So no, I'm not a random who has no knowledge on the Jujutsu Kaisen lore. This video in particular though, is going to address the flaws in Yuuji Itadori, and for those of you who don't know, I don't know how you're here without knowing that, he's the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe or like just yet, because I honestly want you guys to hear me out in full first. So let's stop stalling and get into it. No, this video contains heavy spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen going forward, like really big spoilers, so anime onlys, you are warned. I might say it a couple times in the video, but this is your main warning. First and foremost, Yuuji is introduced as a character with a purpose. Eat the Sukuna fingers, and then die after eating all 20 in order to completely eradicate the curse, Roman Sukuna, forever. This is good. This makes sense, and Yuuji has a purpose. From the very start, you're already knowledgeable that no matter what happens, the story won't have somewhat of a happy ending. It's going to be bittersweet. Yuuji's purpose is fairly established. But then, the problems start once you begin to realize that 60 chapters in, Yuuji is quite literally a non-character. His personality itself is very cut and dry 2000s shonen boy, and he doesn't have any particular quirks or characteristics that make readers go, oh man, this guy's really interesting when he's on screen, even when he's not fighting, which is needed for pretty much any main character. For example, let's compare Yuuji to other popular shonen names. Uzumaki Naruto. While he also has what I like to call the quote-unquote typical shonen boy personality, Naruto's extremely empathetic nature and ability to connect to others makes him interesting to watch. Even the overly mean talk no jutsu is an interesting part of his character that's an extension of that, because we see Naruto resolve conflict through dialogue, something that is reflected of his predecessing reincarnates, Hashirama and Asura. Son Goku. Goku's character is more well known in his older years, like in Dragon Ball Z and Super, whereas even though Goku has a shonen-like nature, his thirst for battle and fighting as a result of his Saiyan blood makes him interesting to watch. This is a quirk that you can't help but smile anytime Goku enjoys a battle because you feel connected to him and his characteristics. Yuuji, on the other hand, doesn't have anything like this. He's just kind of a clueless idiot. As most of the recent chapters, Yuuji just simply doesn't stand up to these other MCs. This isn't helped by his limited number of abilities that he has, which makes his fights even less interesting to watch. Yuuji is easily eclipsed when any other JJK character is on screen, which is something that's not good at all for the MC. I'm going to go off the script for a little bit and freestyle here because I want to go back to why Yuuji is so cut and dry. If you think about it, there aren't that many personal things that Yuuji has. Like, if you could name me any quirks, something that makes Yuuji interesting, that sets him apart from being just a guy, sure, I'd be interested. And there are people who will say that, well, being just a guy is his thing, that's the whole purpose, but while I can acknowledge that might be the case, it doesn't make for an interesting read at all. Going back on script here, I acknowledge that in a lot of series, some characters can outshine the main characters, like how Itachi got to be so popular in Naruto, but it becomes a real problem when pretty much every character feels better to watch on screen than the main character himself. Because the side characters in Jujutsu Kaisen are so fun to watch, fans feel as if they have to defend the main character and bring him up to the tier that all the side characters are by gassing up every little thing that he does, but realistically, gas is all that is. There's no substance to the praise. This brings me to another point, his fights. Fights are an important part of any battle shonen. I mean, it's literally battle shonen. Fights are how characters interact, meet, and even in some cases, become friends. As a result, viewers expect fights to be a spectacle of some sort most of the time. Major fights should enhance the overall narrative and themes of the story, as well as being a good display of characters' abilities. Yuuji's fights do not do this. In fact, They are so boring, I could fall asleep watching them. 9 times out of 10, I end up caring way more about the person Yuuji is fighting than Yuuji himself, simply due to the fact that his fighting style and ability is limited to punching and kicking for 99% of the story. In the later chapters, Yuuji can make his blood explode, but even though Yuuji gains blood manipulation, it's still not entrancing to see because we've already seen it done before in the past. Unlike Yuta, Yuuji's curse technique is not and should not be copied. Yes, it's in his genetics. Do I care? Not really. I'd like to go back to my earlier point where I said that not many of Yuuji's fights actually encompass the narrative or themes of the story. And this is true. If you think about it, Yuuji's first fight was against a special grade he had nothing to do with. The second fight was against that one guy, I completely forgot his name, this cursed spirit wound. And then you have Yuuji fighting Choso, who kind of was there, but it was more like a situational thing rather than a thematic thing. The only one that I could really argue that fully encompasses the themes of the story is Yuuji versus Sukuna, but Sukuna doesn't care about Yuuji. There's no dynamic there. Unfortunately, the themes opposite each other, and they bounce off of each other, but it's not being explored. Yuuji just continuously tag teams him with another person like Yuta, Maki, or whoever is there, but there's no actual real introspection going on here. Close combat fights aren't always boring. But the problem lies in the fact that Yuuji does nothing else. And it's not his fault. He doesn't have anything else. His abilities are limited to Divergent Fist and Black Flash. Is there any interest in watching a dude punch and kick for 22 minutes? Nope. And it doesn't matter how much animation effort, fireworks, and pizzazz go into the anime episodes if the fights are quite literally Yuuji trying to punch really hard for the entire duration. Even shows that are based off martial arts, like Naruto or Dragon Ball, have alternative techniques that the characters mix it up with. Rasengan, Rasen Shuriken, Shadow Clones, Ki Blast, Kamehameha, Instant Transmission, and so on. Even when Yuuji gets the soul-shaking punches later on, it's just punches squared. It's so boring, I can't remember the last time I've seen a more boring MC to watch during fights. A lot of people like to compare Itadori to Gon Freaks because they have kind of a similar personality and their powers are both kind of based off of punching. But the thing with Gon's Janjan Ken is it's reflective of his ability to just think up things on the fly. It's such a random technique that he didn't put much thought into, right? Yuuji just uses the basic Jujutsu sorcerer techniques, Divergent Fist, Black Flash, and his newly found soul-shaking punches. They don't really have anything to do with the themes of the story. His teammates, Kugisaki and Fushiguro, can also punch and kick, but they have curse techniques to augment their abilities, and of course, I don't even need to mention Satoru Gojo. But we can give Yuuji the benefit of the doubt because, after all, he's new to Jujutsu Kaisen society, and of course, he wouldn't have developed a solid curse technique yet. Right? Well, we'll come back to this later. Another big thing Yuuji has is the lack of importance he has as a character. I mentioned this earlier on. Yes, he was Sukuna's original vessel, but Sukuna switched over to Megumi because he had a superior technique, the 10 Shadows, that he needed in order to beat Satoru Gojo. Honestly, I just laughed when I saw this. At this point, I had no clue what this character's purpose was. He doesn't eat the fingers anymore. We know in verse, Yuuji considers himself to be a quote-unquote cog to rid the world of curses, but that's such a cut and dry basic motivation that pretty much every Jujutsu sorcerer has to have. In fact, every shonen NC has a similar function. Tanjiro kills demons, Ichigo has to slay hollows, and I'm not saying it has to be original to be good. But if that's Yuuji's one main defining trait and it isn't done very well what else does he have? Yuuji's role was no longer to eat the figures and die, but to simply eradicate curses like everybody else. The development works when you're inside of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, but when you're watching it as a viewer or reader, it's not engaging in the least. I'm in no way downplaying the mentality of Yuuji and what it represents. I can acknowledge what it means within the story, but the thing is, it doesn't have an effect on Yuuji's actions outside of that moment. Yuuji acts pretty much the same from that moment onward. So while it is a well done part of that arc, the Shibuya arc, the ramifications of that realization aren't very visible later on. Even when we dive into Yuuji's character himself, he turns out quite subpar. Yuuji is Kenjaku's offspring. Yes, Kenjaku took over the body of his mother and reproduced with Jin Itadori, Yuuji's father. It seems like an interesting and intriguing plot point that would be fleshed out later, right? No. Kenjaku dies to Yuta, and that sob plot just ends. No mention of it. It's over. One of the main villains was the main character's mother, and it was just never touched on again. It's like Yuuji set up the perfect moment to dive into Yuuji as a character and his background and decides not to deliver. Okay, we still have some parts that haven't been explained, like Yuuji inserting himself into others' memories, but at this point, I don't really trust Yuuji to deliver. It's still possible for Kenjaku to return somehow, but I don't think anybody would buy his return outside of ass pulls. Yuuji's role as a non-person makes his appearances extremely underwhelming. In my humble opinion, the most development we see Yuuji go through is when he loses hope in the Shibuya arc, and Soda comes to inform him of the importance of his role in the Jujutsu world. It was a good premise, but unfortunately the execution was not the best. In the process, Yuuji killed off Nobara and Nanami. Now, I have no problem with Nanami dying. His purpose was done correctly as a mentor figure to Yuuji, and served to the overall narrative of the story. But Nobara's death was nonsensical and lackluster impact. Realistically, nobody cared when Nobara died. Really. I know that sounds harsh, but I don't give a damn. Nobara had a really rushed-in backstory. At the moment of her childhood, guardian figure left town, and it made her really sad, and we were supposed to care? I don't even remember reading that part in the manga. That's how fucking stupid and rushed it was. We didn't spend too long with Nobara on the big screen, unlike Yuuji, who was actually with her. So most of the reactions to her death were, wow, and then we moved on. Although it may not and probably isn't the case, that is an example of why people will write off a lot of the deaths in Jujutsu Kaisen as shock value, because there's no real substance to them. And by extension, that's why Yuuji's spiral to despair after Nobara's death doesn't hit for me as badly, even though Sukuna was the main cause of it. If when watching a series I can't really understand why a death would impact the character so hard, the author has failed to deliver a satisfying end to that character, and satisfying ends can only be created if the writing for that character was good enough in the first place. But that's enough about Nobara. As I said before, the main excuse you see from fans is Yuuji was new to Jujutsu Society, and thus doesn't have to be so strong as quickly. Well, let me preface by saying strong or weak doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't have to be the strongest, it just has to be done well. Higuruma Hiromi became a Jujutsu sorcerer in a very small amount of time compared to most, and was even fighting on semi-even ends with Sukuna for a while, even being likened to Satoru Gojo. A side character pretty much stole the shine from Yuuji in a fight, even though they were both together, and I can explain why. He was fairly well written and was able to help Yuuji get over his guilt from Shibuya and focus on the present. Higuruma shows that advancing quickly in power can be done well fitting the narrative. In fact, Higuruma made Yuuji look like a side character even though it was supposed to be Yuuji's moment. Yuuji not being engaging in the final arc of the series is just a testament to how poorly his power in writing was handled. He continuously gets hyped by people saying things like, wait until he has blood manipulation, or wait until he uses Sukuna's technique, but we don't want to see that anyways. It won't be engaging, because if a main character's ability isn't to copy, why do we only get to see him use other people's abilities? He should have an ability that reflects the overarching narrative of the story and relates to him as a character. I know there will be a majority of people complaining about, you're a meathead, all you only care about fights and abilities. As I said before, this is a shonen series and it's really important. I want to say that this video wasn't made so that I could gloat or dunk on people who like Yuuji subjectively. That's fine. I have characters that I like that aren't particularly well written either. You're allowed to like whoever you want to like. I also want to say Jujutsu Kaisen hasn't finished yet. Yuuji could completely clutch up and write an amazing story arc for Yuuji that connects the dots on things I missed. Regardless, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on the idea. That's pretty much it for this short episode. Yuuji could have been improved on. By a lot. I know people don't want to admit it, but that's just the way it is. Although people clown on them, when you compare his development to the development characters like Deku, Boruto, Asta, or Shinra, you can see that his evolution just generally pales. Jujutsu Kaisen overall though is a very enjoyable story, but I believe it could have been even more with a spectacular main character. That's it, you guys. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video, which I believe a certain group of individuals won't, leave a dislike. I don't care, I don't see the dislikes anyways. Subscribe to the channel so you guys can hop on whenever I upload in the next 6 months. Thanks for everything, and I'll see you next time.